Dale is an incredible thinker and psychologist. She lives in Boston. Um, it was introduced to me as someone that really thought in her research of instilling culture of kindness as a fundamental answer to being able to promote a community that upholds the values of our schools. Is how do we make sense of today's world? How, with all the things that are happening, how do we maintain the regulation of our emotions? How can we have empathy? How do we just accept divergent thinkers? And how do we not lose hope for humanity in the challenges that we are? So, as you all know, I'm someone that believes in the hope for humanity. I believe in children in a very deep way. And I believe in me learning each day, how can I be a better parent?
Hello, everyone from Seven Arrows community. I'm the director of Little Dolphins, Daniel. Thank you, Margarita. Margarita and I partner in ensuring that our community is safe and moving in the right direction. So thank you for that introduction. Dale, it's very easy for me to talk for the next half hour about how much I appreciate and admire the work that she does. She's taken something that's typically like this esoteric, right, kindness, this feeling, and she's helped us understand how neurologically important it is for our own selves and our own minds and our well-being. She's also personal support for me directly. Seven Arrows and Margarita have had her support me directly as the director of this community, because as you can imagine, it's a lot for us. And she's just been fantastic for myself, for our teachers, for our parents. So I'm really, really proud that our community is presenting for you, the lovely Miss Dale Atkins, Dr. Dale Atkins.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Margarita. And thank you, parents, for taking the time to be together today. I'm so honored. I'm always so honored to speak with you. And I'm hoping that I'll speak for a while, and then I'd love for you to be able to ask questions or comments. I'm not very good at reading the chat while I'm presenting. So if there are questions and you send them to the chat, maybe Margarita or somebody can, or Andres can help me access those. So that would be great. Because one of the things I'm going to talk about is being present and being in the moment that we're in. And I find that when I'm distracted by the chat, I can't really be present with you. And that's what I'm going to try and do 3,000 miles away. And I appreciated so much that we were going to talk in the new year. And interestingly, what we might have expected when we were coming together to talk in the new year is not exactly what we have today as we speak in these early days of the new year. We've all been living with incredible uncertainty during COVID. There's been a lot of extra angst and stress for you in California. And I feel it. I used to live in California. I love California. And I understand how challenging it is to live in places where everything is up in the air. So how do we keep our feet on the ground? How do we stay aware of what's going on while we are responding in ways that are healthy? This presentation was billed as dealing with resilience and patience and kindness. And then there was a tag that had to do with supporting families. And I can't think of anything more important than those elements right now. Even if we had spoken before there was a vaccine on the horizon, and even if we had spoken before you at Little Dolphins and Seven Arrows were able to open your school, which so many people were not able to do, and open it in such a caring and safe and kind way. Even if we had spoken before that, I don't think we would have been prepared for everything else that has gone on just in the last week. And I'm speaking about what happened at the Capitol. And I'm saying that because when we talk about resilience and patience and kindness and supporting one another, we have to be aware of all the things that are happening simultaneously. And one of the most important aspects of resilience is how do we kind of keep our feet on the ground when other things are happening? And how do we stay focused? And how do we stay present? And how do we take care of ourselves when we're living in such uncertainty? Add to that the uncertainty that we've been living in and the fears and the anxieties, and then add that with what's happening last week and where we are right now at this seminal moment in our country's history. And it's a lot. So I'm not unaware that there are constant needs for us to pivot. Every minute we have to pivot. Well, how do you pivot? It's one of the most important aspects of resilience. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to notice. You have to be able to observe, see what's really going on, and learn from the situation. We've all done it during COVID. Some of us resisted. We said, no, I'm not doing that. I would never do that. I don't know how to do that. But we learn. We learn from others. We learn because we practice. And then we kind of get good at something, or at least we get good enough. And so now what I'm going to ask you as we think about resilience is find out where you feel you are the most resilient. Is it that you are learning? Is it that you're adapting what you learn to the circumstances that you have every day? Is it that you're allowing yourself to get help from people who care about you? Is it that you're letting people do things for you? Is it that you're doing things for others because it's easier sometimes if we kind of trade off? And I'm a little better at that than you are, so I'll do it. Or you're not as good as I am, but I can't do it, so you do it and you let it be and you don't judge it. Where are you resilient? How is this transforming you? How are you accepting of yourself as you go through this period? And what are you willing to change? And how are you changing? Are you doing things that you always did and they're still not working? How are you dealing with the anxiety? Are you changing the way you deal with anxiety? Are you asking for help? Are you avoiding things? Sometimes it's better to avoid some things, but generally they're still there when we decide to pay attention to them, or they'll still come up. Are you putting things under the rug and kind of walking around a minefield? Resilience is something that we can cultivate. Resilience is something that we can practice. Resilience is something that we can learn. And what we do is we deal with a situation, and the situation can be terrible. And then we integrate what happened to us and what it means to us, and then we go forward. The classic examples and the classic definitions of resilience have to do with experiencing a trauma, and then how well do you bounce back? How quickly do you bounce back? And some of you have heard me talk about this bounce back activity. I don't think we bounce back. I think we go forward. Because if we only bounce back, we go back to a situation when what happened didn't happen. Everything that happens to us. Everything that happens affects us. So we integrate it, we make it part of our weave. How are we integrating everything that's going on? How are we making it part of our weave? And if you use that analogy, is what we're integrating a bright, crazy color that's all you see? Or is it something that over time has modulated and just becomes part of the weave? Is it something that has to be flashing lights all the time or not? So I think that I'd like to ask you about your own resilience. Where are you resilient? Where do you still need to work on it? And how is this transforming you? And how will it change you as you go forward? Because each of us is having a hard time. And we're all having a hard time in our own way. And we all express how we have a hard time in a different way. So some of that works and some of it doesn't work. Some of it works when we're alone, but it doesn't work when we're with our partner or with our children. So if we're a little bit too close to the edge most of the time, we probably need to take care of ourselves a little more. We probably need to understand what self-compassion is about and how can we show ourselves compassion. And I'll come back to that when I talk about kindness. So when we think about resilience, there's something else I'd like you to think about. And it has to do with, and I talked about this in kindness, for those of you who've heard me talk about kindness, it has to do with role models and our ancestors. So of late, I have been kind of calling up my grandparents and their parents, some of whom I never knew, but I heard stories about. And I heard stories about how they went through incredibly trying and difficult times. And I've heard these stories over the years, my whole lifetime, from family members. And what I was listening to were actually not so much the stories of what they did, but the qualities that they had, the personalities they had, the drive and the motivation they had to get through incredibly dark and difficult times. And so I found that I was really calling upon these people. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, I have some of their DNA. So I wonder if I can get through these times because they were stoic, or they were adventurous, or they took risks, or they were able to do things that I don't even think I could ever do, but they did it. And then I think about people who are role models who aren't related to me. And I think, how did they do it? And I read stories about them, really inspiring stories about people who've gone through unbelievable, unbelievable times. And I wonder, how did they do it? So for me of late, and what I have found helpful for other people, is looking at others who have gone through difficult times and not saying, oh, I could never do that, or I could never be like them, but what did it take for them to make the choices that they did that were so difficult and so challenging? And how did they get through? And most of the time, people get through one step at a time. Most of the time, people get through while thinking about who they are and who they're getting through for. So this is a question that I would like you to answer. And the question really is, what keeps you going? And who are you living for? Are you living for yourself? Are you living for your children? Are you living for your partners? Are you living for your parents? How are you living? You know, when people get sick and they have a life-threatening illness, they say, I'm going to make it through because I'm going to try my best to make it through for my family. My family needs me. Well, how are we getting through now? And the how is the important question. How are we getting through? How are we the role model of getting through these difficult times? How are we, like our ancestors, getting through difficult times? And what do we need to do to practice getting through and getting through well? So my question is, again, since everybody's having a hard time, how can we help one another? What do we need? Well, what we need is affirmation. So how often are you telling people authentically how much they mean to you? And not just without being specific, that the way you waited for me without rolling your eyes and making me feel like I was making you late was really helpful to me. I noticed. And I know that I'm a little slower than I've lately been, than I usually am, because lately I've been thinking about a lot more things and I'm not as focused and concentrating as I usually am. Or I just want you to know how much it meant to me when you came to work the other day and you told me that the way I helped you was really helpful. People need to be acknowledged in a very small but affirming way. Our children need to be acknowledged. We need to be acknowledged by our partners, by our parents. And if we happen to be in a family that's not big on acknowledging, we actually have to acknowledge ourselves. We have to be able to say, I can't believe I did that. I was so exhausted and I still showed up. Or I am remarkable. I am remarkable. Because so many people at these times are just looking at the things that we're not doing well, where we're falling short. And we're holding ourselves to the same standard that we did before COVID, before there were so many deaths, before there were so many changes, before there were so many losses, before we had the election, before whatever your political opinion is and your political stance, before we saw an assault on the Capitol, before. We are not functioning exactly the same. We're doing the best we can. So we have to acknowledge in one another, in our community, in our support community, that we appreciate and we are grateful for who's here with us. I'd like you to share something meaningful with someone in your life, something that they did for you that was meaningful to you, because that actually is an incredible act of kindness. So now I'm going to shift to kindness. When we let people know how important they are to us and why they're important to us and what we learned from them or the impact they made or how we look to them for inspiration, it gives them a sense that they had a purpose in life, that their life has meaning, that they've made a difference. And this is particularly important for those of you who have parents or grandparents who are unable to see you now or are alone for whatever reason, probably because they're trying to stay healthy. Do not think too long about whether you should tell someone what they mean to you. Tell them, show them, write them a letter, share stories, share photographs about times that you were together and had a wonderful time. I know that some of you heard me talk about conversational hugs. When you talk to somebody, particularly someone who you feel an obligation to talk to, don't just do it as a check-in. Really listen, actively listen. Put your phone down and just listen. If you're doing a screen, don't have your device next to you. Really be present and have a conversation that feels like a hug. And go off in different directions. And if you only have 5 minutes, say, I've only got 5 minutes, so I want to really have it be the best 5 minutes. And once you get all the logistics done, then be sure that you say something that is meaningful about you and this person, that only this person and you share, that is unique to your friendship or your relationship. These are the small things that make us feel grounded and make us feel connected. And that's what we need to feel during times of crisis and during times of uncertainty. And the other thing I'd like you to do as you think of kindness and doing acts of kindness for other people, because not unimportantly, I think you all know now that there is a change in our brain when we do acts of kindness, and endorphins are released. And these are the feel-good hormones, so that it encourages you to do another act of kindness. It's called the helper's high. And even since I spoke with you 2 years ago and last year, there's been so much more research that keeps affirming how important it is for our physical, emotional, and mental and spiritual health when we do acts of kindness, when we think kind thoughts, when we say kind words to people, when we stop ourselves from saying something that might not be kind, and we rethink it. And we say, is this the right thing to do now? Is this what this person needs right now? How can I take care of myself so I can think of saying this in a kinder way, so there's more likely a chance that he or she will hear it and pay attention. So we have to think kind thoughts, and we have to look through a lens of kindness. And one of the things that's really important is to take a breath and to take time for yourself and be kind to yourself. So the self-compassion component and the self-kindness compassion, the self-kindness part of kindness is really important. It's almost impossible to be kind for other people and to other people when you're not kind to yourself. You have to fill your reservoir with things that you need, with the water that you need, with the nurturing that you need in order that you can then give to others. So think for a moment about what fills your reservoir and how often are you filling it? And what filled it before COVID may not work right now. So maybe now you have to do it with something else. Maybe now you need a little bit more time to do your stretching. Maybe now you need a little bit more time to bookend before you have difficult conversations, some breathing exercises. So you breathe a bit beforehand, you breathe a bit after, and those are your bookends. Maybe you take out a picture of someone that you love, or you play with your dog before you have a difficult encounter, so that you give yourself some protective device before and after you have a difficult encounter. And it's very easy to think about these things. It's a little bit harder to do them. Whenever you're in your car, what are you listening to? If the news is too assaultive, turn it off. If you have to make some phone calls in your car, be sure that you also listen to some relaxing music and center yourself so that you're not going from thing to thing to thing to thing, but that you are nurturing yourself and massaging yourself in between having to show up and be professional or be the mom or be the dad or be the teacher, whatever it is. We all have so many roles and we need to have space. We need to have space in between not only the roles that we assume, but also performing those roles. And with that space, we can give ourselves something that activates all of our senses. So it could be something that is wonderful to touch. It could be something that you savor looking at. It could be something that you smell. It can be just stopping your car and looking at a magnificent sunset. I don't really care what it is, but the knowledge that you will be much more effective and much happier and more content if you take care of yourself in meaningful ways. Once you integrate that knowledge and that becomes part of your fabric, you'll be able to deal with anything that happens, any change. You'll be able to pivot. You'll have a plan B. You may not have orchestrated the plan B yet, but you'll have your plan B, because the plan B will be, no matter what they throw at me, I'll be able to do it. Why? Because I've gotten through so many things before. I'll figure it out. The knowledge and the confidence that you can figure something out, or you know who to call, or you know who to rely on, or you just know that if you take a breath and you take 5 minutes, you'll figure it out, whatever it is. Instead of panicking, and instead of going to a place that is filled with fear or anxiety. And even when we go to those places, we have to be kind. We have to be kind to ourselves. And that generally looks like, okay, I know you're really losing it right now. What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? Okay, I need to not go to the place of what if. Yes, that could possibly happen, but right now, at this moment, I'm breathing and I'm okay. So what do I need? I need to soothe myself. I'm aware that this could happen, and I'm going to look at it over here. I'm not pushing it away. I'm holding it in this hand. And in this hand, I'm going to say, what do I need to do to bring myself to a place where I'll be able to deal with whatever's going to happen? And that's where our breathing comes in. That's where our laughter comes in. That's where calling a really good friend comes in. That's where playing with the cat comes in. That's where eating something very nutritious and feeding yourself well comes in. That's where perhaps saying a prayer comes in. That's where perhaps listening to a beautiful poem or a piece of music. All of these things help us bring us back to center and say, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. I know I've been in this place before, but I can do this. Instead of a voice that says, oh my God, you're such an idiot. I can't believe you're losing it again. Can't you learn? All of that self-deprecating language, all of that self-deprecating talk is not helpful. It's not kind. Some of us have had that in our mind since we were little children, and now is the time to change it. So as Kristen Neff would say, and she is a wonderful teacher of self-compassion, she would say, understand that you have the right to feel this way, and that if you're really upset or you're really scared or you're really nervous, just talk to yourself as you would a little child who's nervous and scared. And probably you would use a kind voice, and probably you might even want to put your hand on your heart, because if it's someone else, you might stroke the hair, or you might hold his hand, and you might give them a feeling that they were not alone, and you would try to address the pain and the sadness and the fear, and you would say, you have every right to feel that way. It's okay. What do you need? First, you need to know you're not alone. There are lots and lots of people who are feeling similarly. And no, they don't feel exactly like you, but they feel similar. They're also scared, they're also anxious, they're also not sure they're going to pick their kids up on time. But what do you need? I need a good word. Maybe I need a really nice cup of aromatic tea. Maybe I just need a break. Maybe I just need to stop. And I will give that to you so that you understand that you're not alone. You understand that you have the right to feel this way, and you want to give yourself something to help get through it. This is a compassionate response. This isn't whipping yourself into shape. But interestingly, the research shows us that that's what motivates people in corporations, when we're authentic, when we're allowed to make a mistake, and then we learn from it, rather than walk around a minefield, oh my God, I hope I don't make that mistake again. But just to walk through it and to say, this is a difficult place for me to go. What do I need to do? I need to prepare myself. I need to bring a few things with me that make me feel better. And then I'm a little bit easier. I need to do an extra 5 calming breaths. And then I think I'll be okay. So you check in with yourself. Kindness is about checking in with yourself and noticing if you have a rapid heartbeat, you want to slow it down a little before you do what you're going to do. Or you say, yep, I'm really anxious now, without judgment, just accepting. So kindness to oneself allows us to be kind to others. And we can only be kind to others when we notice what's going on. So we have to be observant. We have to pay attention. We have to accept the situation that we're in. We can't do that if we're multitasking. And all of us multitask, but we really have to just say, I can't be as present as I want to be unless I put my phone down, unless I stop what I'm doing and really pay attention to you and look at you, or maybe hold your hand, let you know that I'm with you. I can have compassion for myself, and I can have compassion for you, and I can let you know that you're not alone, but not if I'm doing 5 other things. Because that makes me feel as if I'm not important. And if I feel I'm not important, I'm not going to feel that you're really there for me. So kindness is also letting someone know they're important to you at this moment, you're there for them. Kindness is also about questioning and saying and being inquisitive and saying, I wonder why you feel that way. Tell me a little bit more. Or just understanding that you don't even have to know somebody's story to know that they need a helping hand, or they need someone to say, how's your mom? I know that she's been sick. That's all. Acts of kindness do not have to mean that you're going to start a nonprofit. That's nice. But an act of kindness is being patient when someone is impatient with you. You don't have to up the bar. You can say, it sounds like you're having a hard time. Being kind to yourself is bringing a book when you have to be on a long line. Being kind to yourself is when you're on hold. That's when you can do something else. So that the time goes by, and when the person finally comes to you on the phone, you're not barking at them. I think that when we understand that everybody's having a hard time, we need to remember that we would like to treat people the way we would like to be treated. Focus on what we can control and what we can't control. And what we can't control, we just have to try and adapt to. I'd like you to ask yourselves, is what I'm doing, is what I'm thinking helpful and healthy for me and my family and my colleagues? And to remind yourself again, what do I need to do to take care of myself? What can I do now to take care of myself? And when do I need to say, I need to take a break? And what does that break look like? Because you want to have a break before you have a breakdown. And I'd also like you to think about what you need to do to adapt and to pivot. When we think about resilience and patience and kindness, it's all about adaptation and it's all about pivoting. And if we find that we're not very patient, we may not be patient by nature, but we may just be losing our patience all the time. Try and figure out what's going on. Because when you're not patient with someone, generally, the energy in the room will change and people start being very on edge. And when people are on edge, they're generally not able to be present for each other in the way that we need. So again, patience with oneself and patience in a situation where you might normally lose it is something to try and develop. A few changes can make enormous differences. So even partial engagement in something, if you try to do something, I have to learn how to be more patient. So I'm going to spend time, a little bit more time doing some exercise that I never did before. And I'm just going to stop my brain from going over here, thinking of the things I should do, and kind of be more patient with myself and try and do this exercise. And it's interesting because you may be 40 or 50% engaged, and that's better than not being engaged at all. So the next time you try and do that exercise to build more patience, you might be 60% more engaged. I think what's important is to focus on the part that is engaged in whatever activity we're doing, rather than the part where we're not engaged. And if you've lost your thought, or if you've lost your focus, and if you've lost your patience, come back and say, I'm going to try it again. Or I'm going to try it in 10 minutes. I was talking to my grandchild the other day, and she said, Nana, I was reading this book and it was a little too difficult for me. And I said, okay. I said, do you want to hang in there with it now, or do you want to put it aside for another month? She said, she's 8 years old. She said, I have a lot of tough things I'm dealing with now. I think I'll put it aside for another month. I thought that was a brilliant way of dealing with it. She figured out that she had a lot on her plate, and adding one more thing that was going to be really tough was not worth it. So she put it aside, and we'll read it together in a month. I think that sometimes our children and our grandchildren and our neighbors' children and our nieces and our nephews have so much to teach us. They have so much to teach us in their innocence. And I think what's important is when we're patient with them and we listen to them, they often have ways to deal with problems that we may not have even dealt with or thought of. And I thought that the way she figured that out was really good. And she doesn't have a degree in stress management, and she doesn't have a degree in psychology. She just knows when she gets overloaded, why bother adding one more thing? And she had the choice. So she was able to put something aside for a while because she knew she didn't have as much space as she normally would have. So I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to ask if you have any questions or comments or something that you would like to add that you could share. What are you doing to cultivate your resilience? What are you doing to cultivate your community of support? And what are you doing to cultivate patience? And what are you doing to cultivate kindness? I hope it has to do with gratitude. I hope it has to do with noticing what is rather than what isn't, and adapting.